A dragonfly. Well, you know what? That's just going to add to the plagues that we're going to learn about. No, so he's Western Oklahoma territory. So yeah. So anything west of I-35. So it's a huge territory. And then they just broke into the New Mexico territory. So he actually has not just Western Oklahoma. He's got the Texas Panhandle, and then now he's got 3 towns just across the border into New Mexico: Hobbs, Las Cruces, and another one I don't remember. But yeah, so we're gonna let him go a couple of times. Kind of you figure out the territory and stuff, and then I've got one week of vacation left. So we're playing at home with this small. Not so high. And then yeah. So then we're gonna go and probably just maybe rent a cabin, something like that. Just not do a whole lot of like experiences, but just relax and yes. And I think make our way slowly up there. You know, we've never been in this whole place, so maybe spend the day in this whole place. We go out there. So that's kind of what we're thinking for this fall. You can keep going. You can do this. You have a week coming off.
Sometimes on my days off, I walk around this with nothing underneath.
Is she right there? Isaiah. Yeah. Right? That's helpful. Octavia, but they call it. Yeah.
22nd. Welcome everybody to VBS! Night 3 VBS of Moses at the Full Church of Christ. How are y'all doing today? I don't think there's anyone here. I didn't hear anything. How are y'all doing today? I heard that. Good job. Okay. Yesterday we had a memory verse. Can anyone remember the memory verse? The Lord will reign forever and ever. Good job. What book and chapter and verse? Exodus 15:18. Great job. All right. Here, go ahead and advance. All right. Our next one, we're going to do the theme song. All right. Let's stand up for our theme song. Let's stand up. Oh, my back hurts so much I can't stand. Baby Moses, in the Nile, found by Pharaoh's daughter, adopted him. Burning bush, Moses found. God talked to Moses, holy ground. Now we're going to learn the next verse. 10 plagues in Egypt. Let my people go, Moses said. All right, let's sing the whole thing this time. Baby Moses, in the Nile, found by Pharaoh's daughter, adopted him. Burning bush, Moses found. God talked to Moses, holy ground. 10 plagues in Egypt. Let my people go, Moses said. All right, great job, everybody. Ooh, do you guys remember the jumping up and down song yesterday? Jumping up and down, shout Hosanna. Jumping up and down, shout Hosanna. Here comes Jesus riding on a donkey. Hosanna, Hosanna to the King. He's alive, tell everyone about him. Hosanna, Hosanna to the King. Jumping up and down, shout Hosanna. Jumping up and down, shout Hosanna. Great job. Well, as you can see from my getup, my name is Aaron tonight. I am the brother of who? Moses, that's right. And tonight we're going to go through the Red Sea. And the Red Sea was very deep is very wide. If only there was a song about something being deep and wide. Oh, there is. Deep and wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide. Deep and wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide. And wide, and wide, there's a fountain flowing and wide. And wide, and wide, there's a fountain flowing and wide. And there's a fountain flowing and there's a fountain flowing and great job. I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. I got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart to stay. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart, down in my heart. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. Now, guys, when I do this, what are you supposed to say? Where? Okay, can we practice it? That wasn't loud enough. Okay, let's try it again. I've got the peace that passes understanding down in my heart. Down in my heart. Down in my heart. I got the peace that passes understanding down in my heart. Down in my heart to stay. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart, down in my heart. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. I've got the love of Jesus down in my heart. Down in my heart. Down in my heart. I got the love of Jesus down in my heart. Down in my heart to stay. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart, down in my heart. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. You want to do one more verse? I've got the wonderful love of the blessed Redeemer down deep in the depths of my heart. Down in the depths of my heart. Down in the depths of my heart. I've got the wonderful love of the blessed Redeemer down into the depths of my heart. Down in my heart to stay. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart, down in my heart. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. Okay, guys, Brody has a new song he wants to teach you. So I'm going to go this way.
Hey, Harry.
Number one, turn the Nile into blood. One day, while Pharaoh was sitting on his throne, Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh as God had commanded.
The Lord of Israel says, "Let my people go."
Who is this Lord? Why should I obey him? I do not know this Lord, and I will not let Israel go.
The Lord of the Hebrews has met with us. Please, let us go into the wilderness and sacrifice to him.
Moses and Aaron, why are you taking the people away from their labor? Get back to work.
Pharaoh ordered that the Israelites' work would be increased more.
Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. I am the Lord. I have heard the cries of the Israelites, and I have remembered my promise. So tell the people of Israel, I am the Lord. I will throw off the heavy load the Egyptians have put on your shoulders. I will set you free from being slaves to them. With mighty acts I will judge Egypt. Then you will know that I am the Lord, your God.
So Moses and Aaron went into Pharaoh and did just as the Lord had commanded. And Pharaoh's heart grew hard, and he did not listen to them, as the Lord had said. So the Lord God struck the Egyptians, beginning with the Nile turning to blood, and then with frogs, lice, flies, the cattle sick with disease, boils, hail, locusts, and a darkness so thick it could be felt. But each time Pharaoh hardened his heart more. After God had sent the plagues, Pharaoh's heart was still hard, and he would not let the Israelites go. Again, the Lord spoke to Moses.
I will bring one more plague on Pharaoh and on Egypt. After that, he will let you go.
The Lord says, about midnight I will go through every part of Egypt. The firstborn of your people and your animals will die. There will be loud crying all throughout Egypt. But among the Israelites, this will not happen. Then you will know that the Lord treats Egypt differently than from us.
But Pharaoh refuses to listen.
Moses, Pharaoh will refuse to listen to you. Go and let each of your Israelite families choose a lamb. It must be a male without any weakness. When the sun goes down, kill the lamb. Take some of the blood and put it on the sides and top of the door of every house. Eat the food quickly, for this is the Passover. That same night, I will pass through Egypt. I will strike down all those born first among the people and animals. When I see the blood on the door, I will pass over you, and the deadly plague will not touch you. So make sure no one leaves their house until morning.
At midnight, the Lord struck down every oldest son in Egypt. There was loud crying in Egypt because someone had died in every home. Even though it was the middle of the night, Pharaoh sent for Moses and Aaron.
Get out of here! Take the Israelites and everything! Leave this place!
So all the Israelites did just as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. And then on that same day, the Lord led the Israelites out of Egypt. The king of Egypt was told that the people of the Israelites had left. Then Pharaoh's heart was again hardened. He said, "What have we done? We have let the people of Israel leave. We have lost our slaves." So the king prepared his war chariot and took his army with him.
Guards, let's go.
So Pharaoh and his army chased the Israelites. The Israelites saw the king and his army coming after them. They were very frightened and cried to the Lord for help. The Lord commanded Moses to get the people moving and raise his staff in front of the waters to part the sea. God held back the parted waters and allowed the Israelites to walk through on dry ground.
Blue class, you guys can go ahead and go. Okay, red, go ahead and go. Yellow, you're good.
Come on, this is the walk.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's perfect.
I saw how my mother followed Donnell around last night.
Oh, man, we drove crazy. Hey, great job with the seat.
I think we better give this a minute. We still got some people in the hall delivering. TVs are on out there. They're going to find us. Thank you guys for being here tonight and welcome. Donnell did such a good job last night, and then that Red Sea flood, that's hard to follow. I do not have props or special effects. I don't want to manage expectations right off the bat. This is an exciting lesson, but I've got material from Exodus 3 to Exodus 12, maybe. So we'll be doing an overview, a survey tonight. Kind of picking up where Donnell left off, I'd like us to kind of look at the journey that Moses is on. And we have snapshots of his life in our lesson this week. And I'm a lot like Donnell in that I started off at a different place than I arrived at now, and the odds that I'd be here from there seem slim. It seems unexpected. And I don't think that Donnell and I are in any way unusual. I think that there are some commonalities to Moses' story. I think we see some of those threads in David's story. I think we can see some of that in Abram to Abraham. I think we can see the way God interacts with man. We serve a God who will meet us where we're at, but we serve a God who has expectations of us. And I want you guys to be kind of thinking about that a little bit as we go through our lesson tonight, how we can be useful to God. And then the other thing I've been contemplating, I have a couple different Bible studies going on at any given time, and I've been getting ready for a series on leadership and equipping leaders, and it's been about 3 months in the works. And one of the slides I had in that completely unrelated study following David was that questions, what is it that God found in these men, David and Moses, for example, tonight. And one of the things I see that these people have in common is a bias toward action. And I'm going to talk about that tonight, and I want you guys to be thinking about that as we get into this chapter of the life of Moses. Now, I'm not going to take us all the way through, and tomorrow night we're going to be back in our summer series. So apologies for some somewhat discongruent teaching, but we have a summer series every summer. And by the way, if you're not doing anything a week from tomorrow, come back and you'll get to see some more of our summer series. We invite speakers, the best Church of Christ speakers from this part of the world. And I say that unabashedly. We certainly invite the best ones we can. And it's been a real blessing to attend our summer series this summer. And I hope that you guys will consider being back a week from tomorrow and tomorrow as well. So I want to review nights 1 and 2. Moses is saved as a child. And saved from what event? Who remembers the situation? The boys were to be killed. Isn't that familiar? The symmetry in this story is so interesting. If I remember correctly, the Egyptians were afraid of being overrun by slaves, right? If you've got a free workforce, what do you want? More of them. There comes a moment, though, when you go downstairs in your house and you look around and go, well, there's 8 slaves in here and there's only 3 people in my family. What happens if let's just put that aside. So Moses got saved and raised as an Egyptian. In fact, raised a royal upbringing. He had access to education. He had access to history and culture that he would not have had if he had been raised among the Israelites. And then Moses takes action when he sees a Hebrew being beaten. And this is, I thought that Keith covered this very well Sunday night. But I just want to point out that this is Moses taking action and using his judgment. And he didn't spectate when he saw something that was unjust. Now, I'm not going to pass a moral judgment on what he did or didn't do tonight, but I will tell you only a handful of people out of 100 would have done something. A lot of us will watch something horrible happen. There was some pretty horrible stuff happening in the news this last week, and you saw some people whose first instinct was to get their phone out and video it. Which every time I see that, I think, why are they videoing that? Go over there and help. Go drag that guy off the roof. Don't photograph him. Pull him off of there. But we don't. We don't want to get involved very often. So I want to point out that God has made plans for people who have a bias toward action. And some of us, if we were unruly, if we were rowdy as a child, that was because we had a bias toward action. I'll be perfectly honest with you. As a kid, I hardly ever let anybody start a fight. If I was pretty sure there was going to be one, I went ahead and started it right off. That's a bias toward action combined with stupid judgment, bad decision making.
But the bias, I've come to realize, might be something special. The judgment needed work. And God's had a plan for that in my life. So he flees Egypt and settles in Midian. Donnell covered that quite well. We're going to look at a little bit of that. A leader God can use. As we move through this lesson, I want you to consider a question. What are the characteristics of a leader who God can use? Moses is in Midian. It appears he was there 40 years. And I say appears because sometimes in the Bible 40 years is a signification of what? A good long time. And I think we're safe to say it's 40 years as well. So I read two different rabbis' commentary on Exodus as getting ready for this class. I had several months to get ready, and I felt dumb and smart at the same time as I read some of these rabbinical commentaries on Exodus. He married Jethro's daughter, Zipporah. Am I pronouncing that right? Is that double P become an F? And he worked tending flocks. I don't know that he tended his own flocks. I think we can talk about that a little bit sometime, but maybe not tonight. And then the burning bush event occurred, and I want to just go back to that burning bush real quick and read Exodus 3:13. Then Moses said to God, "If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' what shall I say to them?" And then in 14, God said to Moses, "I am who I am." And he said, "Say this to the people of Israel, 'I am has sent me to you.'" When Moses calls God the God of their fathers, or your fathers, because he's speaking to them, what does that tell you about Moses and his relationship with God? I'm going to suggest to you that either Moses is not sure who's talking to him from the fire, or Moses might not have the tightest relationship with the Lord God Almighty at this point. Will you all conjecture with me in that regard? I'm not so sure that Moses trusts the message he's been given, or that he knows the proper way to talk to God. Now, please don't think I'm picking on Moses. You set a bush on fire in front of me, and my face will be on the earth, and I won't probably be talking at all. But how different do you think Moses is in terms of his familiarity with Israelite Hebrew tradition and religion and the rest of the nation of Israel? What's happened in 40 years of slavery, do you imagine? Has it been easy for them? Have they maintained their tight relationship with God? I suspect it's variable. And Moses didn't benefit from a Hebrew upbringing. Who raised and taught him? During the day, he was exposed to whatever the Egyptian kids learn. Potentially, his mother had access to him as a young child. But I think that we have a situation here where we have a potential leader who's had some distance from God. I'm just going to say it that way. And I would love to get that message across to all the young men and women who have wandered away from God, who have spent some time doing things God might not have wanted them to do, because God does not throw people away casually. And in this case, the story before us that was so accurately portrayed by our players is one of the redemption of an entire people and a re-education of an entire people. It's an opportunity for reset. How did the Israelites end up in slavery to begin with? Anyone want to venture? Yeah. Disobeying, that's the exact word I'm looking for. Disobedience. Absolute disobedience. And how many generations did they wallow in disobedience? I actually am not sure, by the way. I read a lot of commentaries. This isn't good. This is a recipe for the end of a religion. If you were planning to keep the true worship of the living God alive, you probably wouldn't put almost all the worshipers in slavery to some heathens. What did the Egyptians worship? Anybody? We've got some pictures over there. They'll give you a clue. Strange idols. Animal creatures. They had a sun god. They had a river god. They had a god for birds. Small g gods. Just pagan foolishness. And I say that with good authority, pagan foolishness. So, who are you, is Moses' question for God, in a very respectful way, I might add. Who shall I say is calling, right? Who am I giving this message? And God's answer is, I am. Jump forward with me to Exodus 3:10 and 12. Starting in 10, come, I will send you to Pharaoh that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children out of Israel, the children of Israel out of Egypt? He said, but I will be with you, and this shall be a sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. So who's God and who am I? Who am I that I should go? What do you take away from that about a godly leader? Reluctant. He didn't address God, well, of course you need me. How else would you succeed if you didn't have me, right? That wasn't his attitude at all. In fact, this is an attitude I've seen almost every time I've challenged a fellow brother or sister to take on a role in a church or an active service or a ministry, which is, I'm not sure I'm prepared. I'm not sure I'm the best one. My own self have said more than once, there's nobody better? Are you sure that there's no one better? So if you've thought that, please don't think you're offending me. But I think that might be partly, first of all, why God reached out to Moses. And second of all, I think that might be appropriate. Because when God does do miraculous things through David, the small fry, we know it was God, right? When Israel defeats a much more warlike nation, we know it wasn't their might or their numbers or their martial prowess. We know who was in charge. We know who made things happen, and it's always God. And so I'm very interested in this idea, and I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. He was reluctant, by the way. You're not wrong, Bruce, but I'm going to also suggest maybe he had some humility about himself. Who am I? Who am I? And I find that interesting. Who is Moses at this point in his life? What's he up to? What do we know about him from the last 2 nights? Shepherd. Yeah, currently employed as a shepherd. Before that, what was his occupation as he left Egypt? Part-time murderer? Killer. We'll say killer. I don't want to conflate the 2 words kill and murder. They're two different things. But certainly killer. And he broke the law of the country he was in. So, criminal. Will you all go criminal with me? Current shepherd, former criminal, living in another man's house. And I thought Donnell brought that whole delicate balance when you're in another man's house out last night. I can't add anything to that, but I think you have to be on your best behavior when you're in someone else's home. Married to that daughter. Some people who worship God with some authenticity, but some different customs. You see how delicately I said that? I don't want to get into that very much. But I will tell you, of the two rabbis I read, one of them heaped a lot of scorn on the Midianites, while also saying, but they did play a big role in keeping Judaism alive. And so I'm like, so I'm going to suggest that maybe humility and reluctance might not be uncommon for a godly leader. And there are people who don't want to hear that, because there are people who are reluctant to get involved and to serve in the church. And I get it. I really do. But I think that's par for the course. And we'll go forward. I'm jumping to Exodus 4, 18 through 20 now. Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, please let me go back to my brothers in Egypt and see whether they are still alive. And Jethro said to Moses, go in peace. And the Lord said to Moses, in Midian, go back to Egypt, for all the men who were seeking your life are dead. So Moses took his wife and his sons, who had them ride the donkey, and went back to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the staff of God in his hand, and Donnell did such a lovely job with his prop staff. A couple comments, editorializing. As a kid, these are lessons that I learned, and I had a child's understanding of them, and I think Donnell and Keith both brought this out as an adult. There's more here. One of the things that really hit home with me is he took his family. He took his family. As the leader of a household, do I have a right to expect God to always tell me to keep my family safe in a community surrounded by Christians, far from harm and danger? Or might God send me somewhere? I don't know if you follow Brandon and Katie, our missionary in Ukraine's email. If you've subscribed, if you haven't, I would urge you to do so. The prices, but there, we have a gnat. Is the plague? Is this left over from the plague here? My heart lurches at the thought of them in near a war, in a country at war. The coward in me thinks that it'd be safer for them to be somewhere else. And to my shame, in fact. But the truth is, Brandon knows that he'll be safe where God wants him to be. And I don't mean that casually. I think he would, if he were here, he would agree with me as well. And in this case, Moses had a good life. I think Jethro would have been happy to have him stay around for a good long while, and perhaps in time would have carved out a block of land and a flock of his own. Instead, what did he do? And where did he take his whole family? Back where he was a different person. He grew up nearly a prince and left a wanted criminal. How tumultuous is that going to be? And he's taking his family back. So, any attributes of a godly servant we can take from this? Would you say he's willing to go where God sends him? and willing to lead his family where God sends. God's promise. And there's another version of this in chapter 3, but I think this speaks a little more directly. So we're going to go Exodus 6, 2 through 5, and then I think through 9 all the way. God spoke to Moses and said to him, I'm the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob as God Almighty. But by my name, the Lord, I did not make myself known to them. I also established my covenant with them and gave them the land of Canaan, the land in which they lived as sojourners. Moreover, I have heard the groaning of the people of Israel, whom the Egyptians hold as slaves, and I have remembered my covenant. Say therefore to the people of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from slavery to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great acts of judgment. I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who has brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will bring you into the land that I swore to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, and I will give it to you for a possession. I am the Lord. Moses spoke thus to the people of Israel, but they did not listen to Moses because of their broken spirit and harsh slavery. So God's revealing very clearly his purpose to Moses. And I would suggest to you that a leader can sometimes come into certain information about what might be best. And I wish I wasn't a shepherd teaching this lesson, because I would have some more credibility. But I will say to you, the shepherd of the sheep is counted on to know what might be best for the sheep, just period. And I mean the kind of shepherd that's on hillsides. In a perfect world, so leaders would have the wisdom to know exactly what's best. But I will tell you this, then as now, leaders have a burden of explaining what they think God's will is. And Moses is allowing himself to be put in a very interesting situation where he's in almost a priestly role of explaining God's will not only to the Israelites, but who else did he have to convince of God's will? Yeah. Believers? Okay, maybe. Also, you got to convince the non-believers. Oh, really? oh, really? I need them on board. And that's the situation Moses finds himself in, which I find that really interesting. And I would say Moses is brave to treat with Pharaoh. Not just because of that old crime situation. Moses interacts with Pharaoh on God's behalf and asks to let the people worship. The first ask is a pretty straightforward ask. And I thought our play did a marvelous job tonight of explaining that. Hey, we would like to go out in the wilderness and worship God. I have it in my head it was a 3-day situation. But of the commentaries I read that suggested that was probably a travel, a worship and then a travel back situation. But don't get me started on the different opinions of how long it was, but it was time away from labor, and Pharaoh's response to that was no. And I see where Pharaoh was coming from. Slaves don't get, what's the standard vacation if you start a new job nowadays? Is it 2 weeks? Slaves don't get 2 weeks. Slaves don't get vacation. And this is essentially what Moses is asking for. And it's an opportunity, I believe, for Pharaoh to respect the Israelites and accommodate their worship of the Lord God. And this, I won't say it was his last opportunity because you know what happened, But Pharaoh's response was what? Yeah, no, and I'm going to make you work harder. Now you've got to go. I worked in a brick plant for a little bit of time, and I'll tell you the bricks that we have out here are made with material that burns up in the kiln, and they're half as light as they would be if they were all clay. A real clay brick is a heavy deal. And you're forced with a burden if you're in a situation where you're making bricks without straw. You've got to go hustle up straw, reeds, I suppose, in their world. You're potentially taking silage away. If not direct feed, you're taking away silage. We'll have a class later if you don't know what the difference between silage and feed is. but you're pulling that away from other things, and you're taking time to do it, or you're making really heavy bricks, which I hope they didn't do. And then after that, God sent the plagues. And what was Pharaoh's response in each of these plagues up until the final? No deal, right? So, what do we learn about Moses, who treats with Pharaoh on God's behalf? How many were there? 9 plagues? And then the ask to go worship. How many times did Moses hear no before he heard a yes? I think 10 because of the worship. I think 10. I think that Moses had perseverance, tenacity. If Jim Yeager was here, he would say he was stubborn. How many of us would try something 10 times? Ask Todd sometime how many times he asked Cindy out before she went out with him. It's something like that. It's 7 or 8 or 9 times, and Cindy will say, I think he was a stalker, technically. I think he stalked me. Don't believe me, ask Cindy. Yeah, Cindy Corey, she'll tell you. He had serious tenacity. And I would submit to you that if I got into Moses' position, I might ask a couple times real nice, and when the first time I asked, it made things harder on the people, I might say I'm doing the wrong thing. I've made things worse. I've made things worse for the people that I love and care about, who God sent me here to help. I've made their life worse. Moses did not quit in any way, and God was with him. I cannot point out enough how God being with him made a great difference. But again, Moses was tenacious. Final plague, Exodus 11, 4-6. Thus says the Lord, about midnight I will go out in the midst of Egypt. Every firstborn of the land shall die. From the firstborn of Pharaoh to the firstborn of the slave girl who's behind the handmill, to the firstborn of the cattle. There will be a great cry throughout the land of Egypt. Moses and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh, and the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the people of Israel go. And that's 11:10. I consider, and the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, one of the most puzzling verses in the Bible. Does anybody want to help me with this one? I've had a 40-year struggle with the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. Randy, now's your chance.
So when my daughter was about 4 years old, she wanted to spend the night with her grandparents. And she had been there 2 or 3 nights in a row and came and asked if she could spend the night with them. And I told her, and I really wouldn't have minded, but I thought they had had her several nights and maybe it was time for her to spend the night home. And I told her, no, I don't think so, not tonight. And she threw a fit.
Yeah.
And I said, well, now you're not feeling
Yeah.
She hardened my heart.
Yeah. That might be what's happening here. Randy tells the story about his daughter who had been staying with her grandparents and asked for one more night. But the way that she asked made him, instead of just casually saying, no, it's probably time to come home, his heart got hardened by her behavior, and he decided absolutely not. So for those who aren't in the room with us. But I love that interpretation that the circumstances hardened Pharaoh's heart, and God wasn't flipping switches in Pharaoh. But I will say this, looking backwards through time as we are, things worked out in such a way that there could be no doubt that God had his hand. And even when Pharaoh made the quote-unquote decision to let them go, what happened a few hours later? He changed his mind, went after him. Which I also find fascinating and interesting. Anything we can learn about Moses from these interactions? Yeah, he's absolutely persistent. I'm going to say this in a very careful way, but I see Moses starting to be a man of action, enforcing God's will. I think that Moses as a young man was impetuous, but he had a bias toward acting. And I think that as Moses got mature, his judgment got better. Taking his shoes off at the burning bush, good. Asking for sure, now who should I say you are, Lord? He knew he was treating with God, but I think that he wanted to know for sure what the correct forms were, the respectful titles. I think that's a man of action with some wisdom informing him. And here, I see Moses doing things that a reasonable person might not do. I think I see Moses as a man of action doing what God's judgment wants done. And I'm not there in my life, but I would love to believe that my will is more aligned with God's will than it was 10 years ago. And I suspect many of you Christians will agree with me in your own lives. But there comes a time when we do the right thing because it's what God has told us the right thing is. And our own judgment can't dominate God's judgment. Does that make sense? If my judgment is X and God's judgment is very clearly, God's judgment needs to win. I have to defer to God every time. And I see in this passage, to me, I see Moses reaching a level of maturity that's beyond a wise man, that he's allowing God to work through him. And I know that's obvious because we have God talking to Moses every 4 or 5 passages, but for a human, for a man or even a woman to let somebody else pull their strings is no small deal. To say I have willpower is a ridiculous understatement. I'm stubborn like a donkey. And to do things the Lord God's way, I have to be humbled into his will. And I have to have demonstrated to me that God's will is superior to mine and God's way is superior to mine. And I don't know how that can happen beyond experience, but I see Moses coming into that experience and I see Moses behaving in that way. So I would submit that that's another useful attribute of a leader, is that they can place God's will above their own. Okay, Passover. Exodus 12, 1-3. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, in the land of Egypt, this month shall be for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Tell all the congregation of Israel that the 10th day of this month every man shall take a lamb according to their father's houses, a lamb for a household, for continuing, and if the household is too small for a lamb, then his nearest neighbor shall take according to the number of persons, according to what each can eat, and you shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male a year old. You shall take from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of this month, when the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill their lambs at twilight. And then they shall take some of the blood and put it on the doorposts of the lintel of the house in which they eat it. What now? When does the law come? Yeah. How were the practices of God with the Israelites at this time? Do we know much about them? Somebody brings up Melchizedek. I'm going to run out of the room because I don't know. I can't answer those questions. I have a feeling that this was a lot of new worship information. I have a feeling that this was a change in service. And I feel that for two ways. Historically, from the documentation we have of practices and from the silly amount of reading I did of both Hebrew authorities and Christian commentators, but also from the fact that these people have been with the Egyptians embedded for many, many years. And so this is a lot of new. This is a lot of different for them. And this is an opportunity, I believe, for each family to make a decision. It doesn't get presented that way in Exodus. But Exodus is the story of those who left. Who told the story of those who didn't go? No one. And I don't mean this cruelly, but to the Lord God Almighty, their story might not be worth telling. I know that sounded cruel. I said I didn't mean it cruel, but think about it a little bit. There's the in and there's the out. I almost walked away, Randy, but I didn't because I found out how hard it was to track Donnell last night, so I just leaned. And in God's world, I should do this the other way because you're on my right. The in are the people that keep God's rules, and the out are the people who won't. And this is God giving every household the opportunity to figure it out and do it. And I have no statistics on the number of genetic Hebrew families who opted to not do as Moses said. And I would love to believe there were none. But I would suggest to you that the bloodlines probably weren't that pure at this point. And how long have they been in slavery, and how long have they been marrying, and whose daughter-in-law is what? Every house made a decision. And I think that can really help us inform households and families today. I'm not suggesting that I can make a decision and ensure salvation for every person who beds down under my roof. If I would, I could. But my Bible tells me that we each have to make that decision as individuals under the new covenant. But what I can tell you is this is a very clear and early example of God giving instructions and treating the people at a household level. And I think there are responsibilities that are still at the household level. I was taught that a man is the spiritual leader of his household. Does that mean his wife can't know anything about spiritual matters? Au contraire. That's not true at all. But if there's a man in the household, I think that man bears responsibility. And I think that comes from this old, very old idea of what the household is and how we're going to identify ourselves. Is the red tape, or the blood, sorry, still up there? How we're going to identify ourselves in the Passover. So the idea of this Passover cannot be downplayed, in my opinion. I think this defined worship for generations. And in fact, I know it did. Any comments about Passover and God giving these people the chance to make their own decisions? If you decide, I'm doing this, God's going to hold you responsible later for being his people. I shall make of them my people if we go back. And so this is a two-way street. And we'll get into that in a little bit. 12:33 through 36. The Egyptians were urgent with the people to send them out of the land in haste. And I have fast forwarded after the kids died. Sorry, but we did a good Stuart carrying out that young person. I think he did better than I could do. The Egyptians were urgent to send them out of the land. We shall all be dead. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, and their kneading bowls, being bound up, and their cloaks in their shoulders. And the people of Israel also had done for Moses. They told him, for they had asked the Egyptians for silver and gold and jewelry. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. So they had let them have what they asked. They got loaded down with stuff. And left and fled. Did they all flee? I suspect they didn't. And again, no one's telling the story of them that stayed. You remember later when some of the Israelites lamented of their time in Egypt? A little further on, what did they say they missed? Remember when we were in Egypt and we had, what was it? Melons and onions? Anybody? Something like that? So that tells me that some people said, we got it okay here. Moving forward setup. Keith likes maps. I'm with Keith. I like maps too, and I tried to find a good map to show this, but I didn't, and I didn't find one that I could use copyright-wise that was good enough. I found a couple, but they would have been plagiarism. But I want you to imagine as I read this, the setup of this large body of water. The Lord said to Moses, tell the people of Israel to turn back and encamp in front of Hill Haberoth, between Migdol and the sea, in front of Baal Zephon. You shall encamp facing it by the sea. Pausing. You're fleeing. An army's going to be pursuing you. Should you camp beside a sea? You should not do that. Von Clausewitz would say, God's made a mistake here. Sun Tzu would say, this is death ground. You've turned over control of your activity to the enemy because they will trap you against the water. And the enemy, let's say, has cavalry, which war chariots, but work with me. The Israelites, in addition to running a trowel for generations and not a spear, did not have cavalry. So they're pinned up against a body of water with no egress. Egress is like an exit, only you make it in a battle. You don't exit a battle, you egress. There's no egress if you're camped by a body of water. You get drummed out of West Point for building a camp on the shore of an inland sea like this. No bueno. That's no bueno. Marines might do it just because they're looking for a fight, but nobody else would do this. For Pharaoh will say of the people of Israel, they are wandering in the land, and the wilderness has shut them in. See? And I will harden Pharaoh's heart and will pursue him. He will pursue them, and I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host, and the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord. And so they did. So God was in on the setup and knew exactly what he was doing. And that's the part that I didn't quite understand as a child, was you wouldn't put a non-army army in that position, an army of non-combatants, which would effectively be refugees. Let's call this what it is. It's a horde of refugees, and they camped by a body of water while an army was pursuing them. So there's absolute disaster in the works here, and we know how it resolved itself. 21, when Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. People of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, his horsemen. And in the morning watch, the Lord in the pillar of fire and a cloud looked down on the Egyptian forces and threw the Egyptian forces into a panic, clogging their chariot wheels so that they drove heavily. And the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from before Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians." And you know the rest of the story. I don't want to cover the things that we knew by heart since a kid, but I found the strategy of that very interesting, because I think this makes my point about God's judgment versus man's judgment. No competent military leader would put an army of refugees up against a body of water like that. In fact, if you'd ask me to solve that problem strategically, I'm a man, I would have made 3 camps and said go in 3 directions that some of us might live. They're faster than us, they're going to run us down, maybe they won't run us all down. And that's human wisdom. Maybe I could have saved a third. Well, God's got better wisdom than I do. And that's the point. God's leaders have an opportunity to rely on God's wisdom. And even when their own judgment says otherwise, they're willing to let God take precedence. And I think that's critical. So let me go into this a little bit. We got time, right? What do we got? 20 left. It was the bell 5 minutes ago, so 10 to 15. I won't take it all. An action bias plus poor judgment gets you what? Who's that? Criminals? People who buy used cars from someone on the side of the road that just broke down. People who live in regret. I'll be honest, overcommitted people. Sometimes that's me in my poor judgment. If you can't say no, you'll get filled up with a bunch of commitments. So an action bias generally can be good, but combined with poor judgment, that can result in all sorts of nonsense. Elopement, I think that's poor judgment. I just met her, but she seems great. We're getting married tomorrow. If you eloped, I apologize now for saying that. An action bias plus good judgment that's a step up. I'm making a human judgment there and saying that's where your entrepreneurs come from. That's where your secular leaders are going to get selected. Helpers, teachers. What's a teacher do when you really break it down? They sacrifice some of their life and time and energy to help a future generation. Uber capitalists say, you're a sucker for being a teacher. You're never going to get paid enough money. You're wasting your time on a bunch of kids. But teachers are much wiser than that, and they realize we need this next generation, and if the Lord tarries, we'll need one after. And so I think teachers are so wonderful in the church and out. These are people who, I didn't advance, who have good judgment, but a bias toward action. People who have a bias toward inaction, what do they become? A lot of things, but someone kind of has to push them. My mother ran a trucking company, and her plan for all 3 of her kids is that we would each in turn run the trucking company. And we all kind of said, yeah, no, thank you. Like, that's your company. And she ran it in from her retirement condo in the end, because we had our own focuses. But if we would have been the sort of people who could get put upon, we would have, one of us, taken over the family business. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. An action bias plus God's judgment. I have to tell you, I'm beginning to think that's a special group. And I don't claim to be in the middle of that group in any way, shape, or form. But I believe that's where ministers live. People who can actually change lives. Workers in the church. Messengers of good news. As we've talked in our outreach meetings, and Bruce will have heard me say this before, if I had the good news and I didn't tell it to my neighbor, what kind of neighbor am I? What's my neighbor going to say to me if the Lord returns and we have a 20-minute visiting period? That's not scriptural. Randy's going to cover Revelations next quarter, so we can find out. But if we had a 20-minute visiting period, my neighbor could have a real beef with me if I never shared the good news with him, if I never took the time to talk to him about Jesus. And you know what? They're right. My neighbors are going to be absolutely correct about that. That's just what kind of neighbor are you if you don't point out the truth to somebody? So I think that David and Moses have an action bias, and I want to encourage you, Christians, to also have an action bias in your life. There are people in our church that when they see something happening that's wrong, move to make it better. Let's see where I'm at. Oh, we're good. As a sophomore in college, I went on a float trip with a friend of mine since high school named Jim. And we took all kinds of people who were alone on a spring break weekend to the Illinois River to float over by Tahlequah from Stillwater. And so it was some Western Oklahoma kids who weren't driving all the way home, a guy from New Hampshire who couldn't get home, two Vietnamese kids who didn't have anywhere to go, and we took them on this float trip. And Jim and I are coming around a bend in the river, big rain the night before, huge storm, shouldn't have gone. We see the Vietnamese guy's canoe go under a log, big whitewater rolling, canoe disappears. Canoe bobs back up sideways. Boys aren't there. We're 500 yards away paddling. We paddle fast and get up there. And as we're closing up on that big log, the canoe's there. There's a life vest floating. There's a paddle popping up and down. There's no boys. The 2 4-foot boys are missing. I turned around. Jim was in the back because he could steer a canoe very well, and I was not. To say, Jim, what should we do? And as I turned around, Jim dove in the water. Swam past me and started trying to find those boys. I got to the scene of a tragedy, and my instinct was to have a confab. Let's have a rap session real quick about what we do about the boys who are drowning, who haven't come up out of the whitewater, and they've been there, to our certain knowledge, 2 minutes now, because we saw them go down. Jim had good judgment and a bias for action. And his way of telling me what we were going to do was to dive in that water. And he came out not long after with one of those boys. And I didn't know that because I went in right after him. And for 40 years now, I've asked the question, would I have gone in alone? And if I were the senior kid there, Jim was a year older than me, which seemed important when I was 20. Now it's like, would I have gone in? And I've tried to live my life such that I do go in and get involved in tragedy. And Jim, just so you know, you've prayed for Jim. He's still my friend to this day. Jim has saved, in my presence, the lives of 3 people and at least 5. Everybody I know has a story about Jim Westoff saving someone's life right in front of them. He's just a man who's never caught by surprise, who has good judgment, and who cares about people. And I have to tell you guys, I think the only thing better than a man with an action bias and good judgment, or a woman, is a woman or a man with an action bias and God's own judgment. And God's own judgment. And so, as much respect as I have for Jim, and he's a hero. This is probably going out over the YouTube, so Jim's going to see this and get embarrassed. Sorry, Jim. You know what happened. He doesn't want to be a hero. He's a hero all the time. He saved somebody from choking in a cafeteria not long after that. So, summary. God can use us if we're willing to be of use. Are we willing? I haven't always been willing. And sometimes I can give a grudging, I guess. And that's a shame. I can do better than that. And God deserves better than that from me. So I think we have to be willing. We've got to be ready when the time comes. Don't be like me and try to have a meeting when something goes wrong. We act. And then, Mort, nice. It's more, listen, that's an E. Don't pay attention to that. It's more important to be willing than to be skilled. It's more important to be willing than to be skilled. And I don't mean that casually. I have seen that over the years. Every time we have something going on here, a class that needs taught or a ministry that needs attention, I suspect there's one or two people who have the capability, but they're just not there. It's just not the right time. It's not the right opportunity. Who gets things done for God are the willing, that bias toward action. And so I would encourage all of you to have a bias toward action. Make sure it's a bias toward action that's good. Don't elope. If anybody says, the teacher Tuesday night told me to elope, that's not what I mean. But when Moses saw the beating happening, Moses made the decision, there's no beatings, no more beatings. This is enough beating right now. So God seems to favor a bias toward action. And if we're going to act, we should really try to act in God's will. And that is my survey. Sorry it was so fast. I had a lot of ground to cover of Exodus. Comments and questions before we're dismissed. Appreciate you guys' attention tonight. Except for the misspelling. Sorry about that. I've been trying to do a summary lately because the summary, and then I take the summary back through the slides. It's a thing professional teachers do, and I've been trying to. I mean, when you got me teaching after Donnell and Riggs, who are both teachers, I gotta use every trick in the book. Any other comments? Thank you guys. I appreciate y'all. Class dismissed. What's our time? We got 10 before the kids come.
All right, everyone have a seat. Have a seat. Calm down. Have a seat. Did everyone have fun tonight? No? No one had fun? Oh, there we go. Now I can hear you. Okay, let's sing our theme song. Do you guys remember it? Baby Moses, in the Nile, found by Pharaoh's daughter, adopted him. Burning bush, Moses found. God talked to Moses, holy ground. 10 plagues in Egypt. Let my people go, Moses said. Great job, everybody. Maybe. Okay, pop quiz time. Who was the king of Egypt? Pharaoh, good. And did Pharaoh want the Israelites to go? No, he didn't. How many plagues were there? 10. What was the first plague? The Nile into blood. That's right. What other plagues were there? Frogs, flies, gnats, boils, hail, darkness, the livestock dying, locusts, and the Passover, the death of the firstborn. That's right. What did the Israelites put on the doorposts? Lamb's blood. That's right. And who came in the night to check? The Spirit of the Lord. That's right. And what happened if you didn't have blood on your doorposts? The firstborn child died. That's right. Did Pharaoh's son die? Yes. Was Pharaoh upset? Yes, he was. And he said, Moses, stay here. Did he say that? He said, Moses, go. Take your people and leave. Well, did Pharaoh change his mind? Yes, he did. He got his army and he chased after them. But what happened at the Red Sea? What did Moses do? He raised the staff, and what did the sea do? It parted, and they went through on dry ground. That's right. Well, Pharaoh tried to follow with his chariots and his soldiers. What happened with the waters? Closed on them, and they all survived? No, they all died. So the Israelites were finally free. And tomorrow night, we're going to see what God's plan with them is. If you're not going to be here tomorrow, take your bag with you, okay? If you know you're not going to be here, take your bag with you. Everyone else, leave your bag in your seat tonight, okay? Also, you remember when we made those bricks with the clay and the straw? Well, guess what the sun did to them? It dried them all out, so they're ready to go home. So after cookies and... Oh, wait, are we doing cookies? I don't know. Maybe. After cookies and lemonade, we're going to go get our brick and take our bricks home tonight. Don't bring the brick back into the building, please. Anything else? Okay. Okay, who went first to cookies on Sunday? No, I think it was Blue Group went first. It wasn't? Okay, let's do eeny, meeny, miny, miny. Red Group gets to go first tonight. Red Group. And then Blue Group, and then Yellow Group. So Red Group, go ahead and go. Are you going to be here tomorrow? If Okay, Blue Group, Blue Group. And now Yellow Group, Yellow Group.
Did you